Well, I want to welcome you all to our final plenary session of the summit, The Future of Climate Leadership, AI, Trade-offs, and Transformation. We'll begin with framing remarks from Professor John Sterman, followed by a conversation with Tom Taylor, CEO of Bezos Earth Fund, exploring the intersection of AI, climate, and industrial transformation. It's a fitting way to close the summit, a candid look at one of the most powerful and complex forces shaping the future of climate leadership. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Professor John Sterman.
Thank you, Jen. Okay, thank you very much. So I want to thank you all for being here. It's been really energizing for me, to be here. And I want to start out with what is really going on with AI and its impact on the climate, its potential to help, but also its potential to make things worse. So I think you're all familiar with the huge debate over this, right? So there's a lot of people out there saying AI's got an insatiable appetite for energy, and that means more emissions. Data centers require massive amounts of power. Electricity is getting more expensive as a result. AI is terrible for the environment. And then on the other side, you have people saying, wait a minute, here's how AI can help us solve the climate crisis. 9 ways AI is helping tackle climate change from the World Economic Forum in Davos. The UN says there's a critical role for AI in responding to the climate crisis. AI can be transformational in our fight against climate change, according to Google DeepMind. And even the academic literature, my colleague and friend Nick Stern has a paper out saying, here's how AI can really help. Published in the peer-reviewed literature. And then you have why AI can save the world, will save the world, from Mark Andreessen. And what's interesting about this, tech booster, obviously, but he makes it really explicit how that's going to happen. And one of the things he says, he's not the only one, is productivity growth from AI is going to accelerate everywhere in the economy, driving economic growth, creating new industries, creating new jobs, growing wages, and resulting in a new era of heightened material prosperity across the planet. So this debate is very strongly contested, and people have strong views on either side. As the New York Times put it, is AI going to ruin the planet or save it? So I don't want to ask you all directly that question, but let's do a couple of little questions here. I need you all to vote. No abstentions are allowed, and I know if you don't raise your hand, I'm going to know. So agree or disagree with the following statement, and I'll tell you when to raise your hand for agree and when for disagree. So AI will help solve the climate crisis. Agree? Raise your hand. Disagree? The agrees have it by a wide margin. AI will boost productivity and accelerate economic growth. Agree? Even more hands. Disagree? Not so many. They're all sitting over here, too. Okay, now make this a little more personal. AI will help me in my career. Agree? Disagree? Ooh, okay. Wow, that's very interesting. So now how are we going to get at this question? So we're going to do that by using the En-ROADS Climate Policy Simulator that we've developed here at MIT in close collaboration with Climate Interactive, which is a nonprofit think tank out of, well, it's a distributed organization around the country and the world. Some of you have seen this. So raise your hand if you've ever seen it, used it, including in the session that we just had. Fantastic. If not, it's free. It's available in 22 languages. Encourage you to go for it. But what I'm going to do today that's a little bit different is we are going to use it, there we go, in a version nobody's ever seen in public before, in which we've added AI and its climate impacts, both how much energy and emissions result from it and potential climate benefits. So this is beta test. First public use of this. Remember, all models are wrong, including brand new models with brand new stuff. So nothing I do here is a prediction, but I want to stimulate some conversation, and then we're going to ask our guest Tom Taylor some hard questions about this, and you're going to have a chance to weigh in on these issues too. So in the baseline scenario right now, here's total global primary energy demand, coal and brown at the bottom, oil in red, fossil gas in blue, all the different renewables, which are separate in the model, but gathered together in the green wedge of renewables, bioenergy of different types, and then nuclear power on top. And in the baseline, it doesn't grow as fast as the economy because there is ongoing efficiency improvements from technologies and policies we have today, but it's growing, and the renewables are growing really, really fast, but not fast enough to drive out all the fossils. So as a result, this is greenhouse gas emissions, and the biggest contributor is the gray band. That's all the carbon dioxide from burning the coal, oil, and gas over here. The second biggest contributor to warming is methane. That's the light blue here. Third biggest is carbon dioxide emissions from deforestation and land degradation, LULUCF we call it, and then nitrous oxide and all the different fluorinated gases in the other color bands here. The result of this is the economy grows, energy demand grows, emissions are relatively flat because there are some existing policies and decarbonization technologies in place, but that flat pattern of emissions results in a very significant continued warming trend. We're already at the 1.5 degrees C, 2.7 Fahrenheit target from Paris. The remaining carbon budget for 1.5 degrees is basically zero. We're there today. In this baseline, we breach the 2-degree upper limit of what is generally considered the most warming we can tolerate. It's not like 1.99, everything's okay, 2.01, humanity is extinct. But people agree 2 degrees we must not go over. We breach that threshold before 2050, when you'll all be in the middle of your careers. And I'll still be, sorry? Oh, I'm still on the slide. Why is that happening? You guys, AV, you need me to switch the model over. Oh, I know why. Here we go. It's my fault. How's that? All right, that's better. Thank you, Jason, for that feedback. All right. So, you know, in 2045-ish, when we cross that threshold, plus or minus however many years, I'll be 85 and still teaching here at Sloan, maybe. So, you know, what does 3.3 C, 5.9 Fahrenheit of warming mean by 2100? Well, it would be nothing short of catastrophic for humanity. Now, I don't have time to go into this, but we track in the model a huge array of the impacts of climate change, and let's just say they're not good. Let me show you an example. This is sea level rise for the Gulf Coast of the United States in that baseline case. That's a huge catastrophe for the economy, not just the lost land and biodiversity, because there's a tremendous amount of critical infrastructure for this country in this zone. And then here's wildfire risk. So the scale here, as you get hotter colors, is how many days per year beyond today of high wildfire danger risk. This is 2020, when we were at about 1.3. It's already significantly higher fire risk in all parts, all parts of the country and the world. But in 2100 in the baseline, you're headed here. That's going to make what happened a little over a year ago in LA look like a little backyard barbecue. So there's lots of other harms from climate change that we track in the model, but the question for today is, what is AI likely to mean for this? So we've added AI into the model, and the first thing I'm going to do is let's go look at the assumptions behind AI, and it's right here, AI and data centers. And there's a variety of critical assumptions you can vary. There's tremendous uncertainty about all these, so you know, we're going to move some of these assumptions to see what might happen. But first, let's look and see what is AI's contribution to climate change. So here are CO2 emissions from using the energy in data centers, and it's been growing spectacularly. Now, some people are saying, well, you know, it's the AI's energy use, which we have over here, is going to be, let's see, yeah, here we go. Total electricity for data centers and AI in terawatt hours per year. It's been growing unbelievably fast. Some people are saying, oh, it's 2-3% all electricity today, it's going to be 30% by 2030. We don't think that's going to happen, but it will continue to grow in our baseline story. So what does that mean? Well, let's look at the emissions here. The emissions are now, getting close to half or more gigatons of CO2 per year. Put that in perspective, total CO2 emissions per year are 40. So that's actually a pretty big deal. And if it keeps growing up to a couple gigatons per year, that's going to have climate impact. Now, AI is also getting more efficient, and that's a wonderful thing. So we can look at that too. And let's take a look at the energy intensity of data centers and AI. It's already been going down, and the baseline is technology is going to help drop that energy use per exaflop here quite a bit more. But now that's all very uncertain. So let's play with some of the assumptions here. This is the thing you want to look at, along with what's the impact on the amount of warming by 2100. So first of all, what if technological progress is better? So this controls the strength of the learning curve for the energy intensity of AI. The more AI you use, every time you double the cumulative amount of AI compute that's happening, you're going to drop that efficiency by some amount. And nobody really knows. This is a pretty strong assumption in the baseline. But what happens if it's even stronger, possibly aided by AI? Well, so now energy intensity of AI and data centers goes way, way down starting now. But what happened to the climate? Pretty much nothing. We're at 3.3, and we got 0.01 degrees of improvement from that, even though the emissions basically flattened out. A lot of debate about this. Just isn't the most important thing. Now, we've got to do it. We've got to do it, because the local impacts of AI's energy needs and water and all the other resources, and we just heard about critical material, critical minerals, those are big. So this has to happen, but it's not going to really be a game changer for the climate. Now, furthermore, when you improve this, as you make AI more efficient, you're also lowering its cost. And that means people are going to use it more. Standard economics, right? What's the elasticity of AI demand with respect to the cost per exaflop or per query, per token? Nobody knows that, but we've made a moderate assumption here. But what if it's a lot higher than people think, which could easily be true, because we're just at the very beginning of the AI revolution, and there's a huge amount of opportunity, latent demand, that at current prices to build, train, and use models are not available for billions of people and many, many countries and companies around the world. But what if the elasticity is even higher? So now look what happened. The emissions went up even more. This is called the direct rebound effect, right? You make a technology more energy efficient, great, it's going to lower emissions. But you're also making it cheaper to use. People are going to use it a little more. And in the case of AI, they could use it a lot more. That undermines the direct benefits of the efficiency improvements. Now, it turns out the direct rebound effect is also not a game changer. Here we're at 3.29 again, right? So it's very likely to be important locally and for AI companies and companies that want to use it extensively, but it's not a huge deal. The other thing that we want to look at is just how fast is AI going to percolate through, diffuse, and be adopted throughout the economy. Study that just came out from the Center for Collective Intelligence here at MIT, led by my colleague, Professor Tom Malone, found that when you look at all the ways AI is being used today by companies, it's only about 8% of the occupations and business activities are covered by that. It's the things you would normally think of as AI being really good at now. Content generation, content summary, image generation, these kinds of things. Most of the work, most of the economic activity has not yet been touched in a significant way. So what happens if AI spreads throughout much of the rest of the global economy? Well, that's this assumption here. We've got a moderate value here, but let's take a look, actually before I do that, let's take a look at the total amount of AI compute. So this is in exaflops per year, or exaflop seconds per year, if you like, of compute. And it's been growing like crazy, and it's projected to keep growing. But what if AI proves to be capable and has the performance to really make a difference here? Well, then it goes up. Now notice the scale changed a lot. That's your baseline case. You'd have a lot more AI use throughout the economy. That increases the emissions earlier and to a higher level, but didn't have a big impact on the climate. So these are really important issues, but they're not going to be decisive here. So the really big issue is, and remember, the vast, vast majority of you raised your hand that you agreed with the statement that AI is going to accelerate economic growth throughout the economy. That's the really big issue. Right now, that effect is completely turned off. Now, how much can AI boost productivity, and how long will it take for that to diffuse throughout the economy, get implemented, be short-run dislocations? Some people will lose their jobs through automation and AI. But in the long run, the history of these massive general-purpose technologies like electricity or steam before that is, sure, some people lose their jobs in the short run, but then they move into new sectors with new opportunities, and economic growth just takes off. Now, how much? Right now it's 0. We know that's wrong. Maybe it could be as high as 25% in the long run, with an average lag for AI adoption of 10 years. And you can vary that, but look what happened now to the climate. 3.6 degrees of warming. This is really important, and this is where all the action is. This is called the indirect rebound effect. You increase productivity through AI or anything else, people are going to use the extra income that's generated to spend, to invest. It's going to grow the economy. One way to think about this is, suppose you get rid of your gas-guzzling SUV and buy an EV. Well, you should already be doing that, right? But if you haven't, how much money per year are you going to save? Well, even at pre-Iran gas prices, you're going to save several $1,000s per year in not having to buy gasoline and lower maintenance, et cetera. Now, many thousands of dollars, but just think about it before the war. What are you going to do with that money? Well, some of it you're going to spend. Some of it you might invest. The amount that's invested goes to grow the economy. The amount that you spend, well, I asked my students this question: what would you do with those few $1,000s? And a lot of them literally say, I'm taking my family to Disney World. Well, listen, if you do that, family of 4 coming from, say, Ohio to Disney World for a few days, your carbon footprint is going up even after you account for the carbon you saved with your EV. That's the indirect rebound effect. Productivity gains from AI are going to grow the economy faster, and that's going to increase emissions everywhere, on average, by the average carbon intensity of all that economic activity, which, remember, is going down here. So 3.6, serious catastrophe. So that's the big issue. Now, what can we do about it? Well, let's go and look at policies. Well, one issue is, how much could AI lower emissions by accelerating the innovation and technological progress that you've been hearing about throughout the conference yesterday and today? So nobody knows, right? This is all speculative. Those extra emissions are happening now. Every time you build a new data center and train a new model, you're generating carbon today for sure. How much benefit could you get from AI-enabled innovation? Nobody knows. But let's take an example. Let's assume that technological innovations aided by AI could, and let's just be really optimistic, this year lower the cost of nuclear power by half. What's that going to do to the climate? Okay, multiple choice here. Oh, well, let's do it the way Crystal did it. Hold up as many fingers as you believe would correspond to how many tenths of a degree of reduction in warming this 50% AI-enabled reduction in the cost of nuclear would generate. So if you think it's 1/10, 1 finger, a whole degree, 10 fingers, let me see those hands. A lot of heterogeneity in the room. Way back there, your hands up, you got to vote. A lot of spread here. Well, let's try it. So, 1/10 of a degree. Why does it have so little impact? Well, one reason it has such little impact, the first question you want to know is, did we actually get more nuclear? That's this graph right here. We did. We got a huge amount more nuclear power. We made it really, really cheap. Well, so why doesn't it do more for us? Well, one of the issues here is it still takes a really long time to build conventional nuclear power plants, or even SMRs, and they don't even really exist yet. You could shorten that time delay with AI or other actions, but I'm doing it in 2026. You can't have it shorter than that. So part of it is the long delay to scale it up. But the other part is, look at the energy mix, okay? So I'm going to take away the policy, no extra nuclear here except from the AI assumptions, causing a little bit more. And here's the energy mix. When you bring the nuclear cost breakthrough in, we get less coal, less gas. We don't use oil to make electricity. But what else is happening? Well, let's take a closer look at the electricity sector. Here is, let's see, it is here. This is where all the electricity is coming from in our scenario. And you take the nuclear away and then bring it back. Squeezing out coal, squeezing out gas. What else is happening now? Squeezing out renewables. And by the time the nuclear really kicks in, the energy system, the electric power system, is dominated by renewables. So sure, your electric utility, your AEP or whoever is in the room today, and you make, through these technological breakthroughs, nuclear is now super cheap. It's the best way to go. I will build more nukes. I'm also not going to build as many wind farms and utility scale solar plants. So you have a cannibalization effect that lowers the leverage of the assumed breakthrough here. Well, I'm going to leave that in there. And what else might AI enable us to do? We could do the same thing for renewables and a variety of other things. But the message, I hope, is clear. We can't get anywhere close to where we need to go, which is below 2 degrees, unless there's a broad array of other actions, policies, governmental policies, corporate policies, citizen movements to drive the adoption of the whole array of other technologies on the board here. So how about energy efficiency? If we can really boost the energy efficiency of our transport system and our buildings and industrial facilities, that will get us from where were we, 3.6 down to 3.1. We're almost back to where we were without the impact of AI on the economy. What else? What if we accelerate policies to adopt renewables? What if, we still got nuclear in there, what if we implement nature-based solutions, so reforestation and forest restoration, cut emissions from agriculture, from waste, landfills and leakage of the fluorinated gases and so forth. Let's take the subsidies away from the fossil fuels that still enjoy significant subsidies. That would be just about taking the subsidies away. Now we're down to 2.4, still not under 2. What else do we need to do? Well, let's cut the rate of deforestation, 2.3. And as you've heard from other folks at this conference, the single highest leverage thing that we need to do, and is happening in a few places but not nearly big enough, is to put a meaningful price on carbon. So what if we did that I don't know, $150 a ton, which is way below estimates of the social cost of carbon, the net present value of the harm from emitting a ton today. There's 1.9. Now I'm phasing it in over 10 years. You can change all these assumptions, but take a look at the board now. What we've got is AI could be significantly worsening the climate crisis, especially if, as everybody hopes, it drives greater economic growth. It might help reduce emissions, perhaps a lot in certain sectors. We don't know. That'll take time. And also, don't forget, the fossil fuel industry is one of the most aggressive users of AI and machine learning. And they've been doing this for a while, and that's helping them find, lift, refine, distribute, and sell fossil fuels to you cheaper than before. So that undermines the climate benefits that AI can generate. None of that, while it's necessary, is enough. What has to also happen is policy. because it's not just about the technology, the invention, and it's not even just about the innovation, which is bringing the invention to market for the first time. It's about adoption, persuasion, scale up. So what could happen there? Well, let me tell you that it's really hard to get a handle on this, but I had a long dialogue I had a long dialogue about this the other day as I was preparing for this, and my interlocutor came up with this, a compact mental model. AI climate benefits are the innovation, but also the probability that any of these innovations get adopted and diffused times the speed of adoption times the scope. So, of course, in every presentation, I'm obligated under my MIT contract to show at least one equation, and this is it. So then the summary in English was, AI improves innovation speed, but institutions determine scope and timing. We can't do it without addressing all the institutional, policy, psychological, and other barriers to the adoption and the scale up. So who was my interlocutor here? It was AI. And if AI is even willing to admit that it can't solve all the problems, then I think that's pretty important. So let me wrap it up, and we'll bring Tom up for the conversation. So what is our challenge? What is your challenge? How do we boost AI and data center efficiency? Doesn't change everything, but it's really important that we do so. How do we ensure that AIs and data centers are actually paying the full cost of the energy and resources they use? How do we get a larger fraction of the queries and models applied to climate instead of the AI slop and the malicious chatbots and the election interference and the deep fakes that are actually, it's maybe 1 in a million queries to AI have something to do with climate. I think that's a gross overestimate, but that's the estimate Copilot gave me. Then how do we use AI to cut emissions throughout the economy? How do we shorten the delays in the innovation to adoption to scale up chain? How do we get these strong climate policies that we need everywhere across the board adopted and get them to stick? And then how do we limit the rebounds, especially the indirect rebound effect? Those are the questions that I think we face as a result of AI. And what we'd like to do now is set this aside, and you all AV folks, you can blank out the screen, or well, you could leave these questions up, that'd be fine. And I want to introduce our special guest, Tom Taylor. So Tom is the president and CEO of the Bezos Earth Fund. He was appointed last July after 22 years at Amazon, most recently as senior vice president, where he spent his last 5 years there running Alexa, the AI assistant, as you all know. The Bezos Earth Fund is guided by the belief that the Earth is the best planet in this solar system, works to protect and restore the natural world, working with partners around the globe and under the direction of Chairman Jeff Bezos and Vice Chair Lauren Sanchez Bezos. The Bezos Earth Fund is developing innovative solutions to ensure that the planet remains a place we can and want to live on. So we're delighted to have Tom here, and I'll welcome you to come up. And I'll also point out that Tom is an alum of the Sloan School. He was a member of the what we then called Leaders for Manufacturing, now Leaders for Global Operations, dual master's program, an MBA, and an engineering degree from Sloan. Welcome.
John, thank you.
So Tom, you had never seen that before, so.
I would like to do my presentation now.
Yeah. How many slides? About 40?
Yeah.
So let's just start out with a little bit about your journey, your pivot from Amazon to retirement, and then coming out of retirement to helm the Bezos Earth Fund. What was the motivation, and what do you see the mission to be?
Well, thanks, John. First of all, a real pleasure to be here back at my school. Got to walk down the Infinite Corridor just for old time's sake.
Great.
But so I was at Amazon 22 years. I think of myself as an engineer. I think of that as sort of what are the problems, how do we solve them? Amazon had a very strong customer focus. What are the issues of customers? How do we make their lives better? I could ask for how many people have bought something on Amazon, but we don't need to waste our time. I know the answer, and I thank you. And at this point, when you think about retirement, I read a lot of books. You should prepare for this later on in your lives. And the recommendation is sort of like, think about this time of retirement as quarter 3 of your life. And it's a time where you might think about how do you take all the skills and experiences that you have and how do you give back in some way. Quarter 4 has a different meaning, and you should be estate planning and other things, a cemetery plot. But quarter 3 is really how to give back. And I said, how can I bring my experiences at large scale in industry and technology? And I'll tell you, I actually had my secret goal was, can I get on the board of Exxon and make a difference? And I worked with different companies looking at board work, big public companies. And then it turned out that a lot of them didn't want, they liked, I bet this guy's going to be too disruptive, so we're not sure we'd like it. And I frankly had come to peace with that I wasn't going to get this new role in that way. And this quarter 3 was also like, I want a sense of adventure and I want a sense of service. But it doesn't look like the public board work. But I was very happy with the adventure side, traveling a lot. And then I got a call from someone who was looking to backfill. My predecessor was named Andrew Steer at the Bezos Earth Fund, asking if I knew anybody who was interested in the role. And I thought about it for about 2 seconds, and I said, yes, me. And why was that? I just felt like this is where I could be of service. I did not think, I had no intention of working back full time, but I thought this is a role because I know Jeff, I know Lauren, I can apply my experiences at Amazon, I can apply my relationship with them, and I want to go back and solving these problems. I want to make a dent in the world. And I'm willing to go back full time. And it's also a matter of personal. Your spouse has to be ready for that and that sort of thing. But I am just thrilled to be in this job. The team is very energized. I inherited a wonderful team from Andrew, and I think we're accelerating some of the work. And I feel like Jeff is also like, great. The team can now communicate with him in ways that are understanding, a more engineering approach than just more indirect policy work and financial things. It was just not effective.
So before I come back to what your vision and strategy for the fund is, did you have any prior background in climate, energy, sustainability? Obviously, Amazon is a big user of electricity, but were you a sustainability guy beforehand?
No.
So I think that's quite interesting and important because, and it's been one of the themes throughout this, that invention is great, science is great, can't do it without it, but it's about practicalities, getting things that customers actually want, are willing to buy, designing your business so that there's a viable, resilient supply chain, et cetera, et cetera. And that seems like one of the big capabilities that you bring to this role. So now the question is, what's your vision for how the substantial amount of money that the fund has to use for how it can have the best impact on the climate crisis?
Well, I think, again, I'm coming in with a bit of an engineering mindset, and it's, you start off going, look, we have the number one is what's creating the growth in heat? It is the use of fossil fuels, so we have to reduce that. We have to find ways to bring more carbon out of the atmosphere or in the oceans. And so just a quick background, when Jeff and Lauren started the fund, which is large, it's a $10 billion start. I keep reminding people it's a start. I think we know Jeff has more money than that, and my goal is to get him to commit more, as we've seen Bill Gates and other large wealthy philanthropists do. His focus on nature, I think, was an interesting one. So obviously there's a lot of overlap between how to improve sustainability, the impact of climate through nature, right? So emphasis on energy transition, a focus on nature conservation and restoration. The best way to bring carbon out of the atmosphere is trees or changes in the oceans. So we have restoration, food transition. The biggest impact to nature is the food that we eat in terms of cows and sheep. And that doesn't mean we think everybody should be a vegetarian. We believe very strongly innovation will lead to ways that people will have choices, and they should have We think about affordability and taste and all those things. We say the world should be and, not or. So we're investing both in alternatives to protein, but also can we make the production of beef more effective, use less resources. In the energy world, I think it's not just electricity, which you talked about, but it's also what people say, it's molecules and electrons. So we're also looking at, most of the energy of the world is actually going into process heat and creation of, plastics. So we're looking at materials that we use, cement and steel. I mean, so far I haven't hit anything probably that we all don't know. And we have another focus. So we are using the science and the data. How do we inform the world of what's going on? And then we see the application of AI as how we can improve to do that. Can we invent new ways back on these other ideas, which you showed, and I feel very strongly will be important. And then the last area, we're going to have there's a lot of systems that are just inefficient. Food systems, waste systems, energy systems, and we're kind of looking at it from a city level. I'm trying to bring something from Amazon, which is, it was very clear in Amazon who the customer was. Somewhat interesting in this industry. We say, well, who's the customer? And we're like, is it the earth? Is it the birds? Is it us? And it kind of is all of us. But we've chosen, let's look at cities. There's a huge amount of inefficiency in cities. I'm trying to get energy here, I'm trying to get cooling here, I'm trying to get food here. And we think there's probably ways just to improve efficiency and reduce waste, which is, if you just looked at it that way, a big contribution. So those are our areas. We are a philanthropy, so for all of you hoping to fund your venture capital, that is not what I do. So don't spend a lot of time on that. But we do look at, it is a large fund. We can do things that are more like we call hybrid financing. We can be capital return limited, so we can catalyze other people. We can show up with governments and say, well, we're putting in 10 million. It'd be kind of embarrassing if your country didn't put up $1 billion. And so we can do those things. We can convene people together. And one area that I'm excited about is sort of more on research. So can we accelerate in time areas, so for example, sort of third generation geothermal and power. I think that could be very transformative and done in the right way. I think it will be the lowest cost power, but it is probably 30 years away if we don't do anything. The market will get there, but if we could come in and do acceleration of that kind of research, that's just one area. We have a number of these, but if I could bring that in 10 years, that would be dramatic.
Yeah. And you just saw this, right? Shortening the time delay in adoption and scale up really can make a difference, because a ton emitted today creates a lot more climate damage than a ton emitted in 2024. And likewise, a ton saved today has a much bigger benefit than that ton reduced in 20, 30 years. So that seems really important. Go ahead.
Sorry, let me add one more area because I forgot it. We don't have a great name. If you have a better name, let me know afterwards. We kind of climate repair. Like let's agree we're going to go by 2 degrees. We're going to have more cumulative carbon and methane and nitrogen than we want. So we have to find ways to bring that out. We're choosing ways, whether you call it nature-based or technology. It's aligning with how the Earth does it anyway. And it's if I sit in the chair and listen to that presentation, I'm like, yeah, we don't just need like 1 gigaton per year or 10 gigatons. We're going to need 30 gigatons. And that was, by the way, in some of my visit up, I'm in DC, came up to Boston, so I'm talking to a number of people. I think they're actually, I was worried that would just be too expensive. But I think there are positive tipping points created by technology. And this would be one of the areas to say, can we reduce the cost of pulling carbon back out again? And if you can get that down to $30 a ton, and you believe the cost of carbon is 100, like we're going to do it.
So let me just pursue this a little bit. So we heard about hybrid finance, supporting technologies, speed adoption and diffusion, et cetera. What's the theory of change here behind the fund? We have this massive crisis. We're headed for well over 3 degrees. We need to get to well below 2. That's the official language from the Paris Agreement. What's the theory of change for how the fund can help make that happen?
I'd go back to you've got to change how we're using energy. You have to reduce the carbon going in. I'm just being a chemical engineer now, right? You have to reduce how much carbon's going in and pull it out. One thing I'd say, maybe the question is, what's the role of philanthropy in all this, right? Because a lot of times companies and governments could do that. A phrase I heard the other day that I liked is like, if you want $100 million, go to philanthropy. If you want $1 billion, go to the government. But if you want $1 trillion, you got to go to industry. And so I think that's one of the areas that I'm trying to use. I think Jeff's brand and my experience is, how do we bring industry to the table? And so a lot of the conversations, or a lot of the headlines are the government's pulling away. At least in my conversations, I don't see industry pulling away. They have a much longer time horizon. They're not thinking about political cycles. And so you're back to, well, what are the tools that industry thinks about? Well, it's financial return, their impact. They understand that the world cares, and so therefore the companies care about saving the planet, if you will. And so we're just finding, I think, some of the ways that we can find to help industry be successful by doing the things that we know need to be done, but bring industry to the table and let them drive the trillions of dollars that we need.
Well, I'm hearing, that the 10 billion, which is a lot of money, but not a trillion, can help reduce the uncertainty and risk, which are different things, but that would give businesses the confidence to make the investments at the trillion scale that's needed here. And likewise with the hybrid finance part of what you're up to, that's also using the fund as an amplifier and catalyst to generate the resources that we need. Is that a fair statement?
I think, yes, that's accurate. I think we've done well with buyers alliances. A lot of these issues are, you've just got to drive demand up so that the supply matches and the costs come down. And I would say even in convening, that we are seen as a neutral broker. So I've talked to a number of energy companies, agricultural companies, and the CEO's like, what would I do? How does philanthropy work? And I'm like, okay, agricultural company, it turns out you all believe in regenerative farming, but you're not allowed to talk to each other about it. Well, I can broker that. And they're like, oh, that, so anyway, I think there's some very interesting ways, focusing on conversations. We just started with kind of getting that, let's get the hyperscalers in terms of how do we drive some technology innovation. The hyperscalers, the tech companies, are willing to pay a premium, and we just have to get them in a room, and I can have that conversation with them.
Great. So I want to make sure there's lots of time for you all to ask Tom questions, or me, but Tom. And I hope you've been entering them into Whova for us. But before we do that, we've got a lot of really committed, energized folks here at the beginning of their careers in business and tech and finance. What would you advise them? What in this moment of discouragement, and frankly, some people are in despair about the prospects that we can actually make a big difference here. What would you advise our folks here?
Well, I think it is, I understand people are, if you read the headlines, it's easy to fall into a little bit of despair, which is unfortunate, because then you feel like, oh, I don't have agency, I can't do anything. If I can say anything, I'm like, listen to what John talked about, what needs to happen. The jobs are there, the work is there, whether it's some of it's engineering, it is financial understanding, it is measurement systems, but it's even communications. You and I were talking at lunch about what would happen if we could get 1 billion people to do something that makes an impact on climate, which is different than, can I improve the efficiency of a nuclear power plant, right? We know how to work that, but some of that is getting people to understand that can make a difference. We have to decide what is it we would have them do, how do we make it sustainable, but any of the jobs, any of the backgrounds that you have here in this room, I think will apply to any of the works that we want to do in climate. So if you're caught up in, I don't see any policy work in DC, at the moment that might be true, but there is a ton of other jobs that are going on, and it isn't just philanthropy. I think you want to be in industry. If we made, who knows, nobody will beat me up afterwards. If we made coal cleaner, that's better than dirty coal. If we could make gas cleaner, so somebody's like, oh, the worst thing, if I can't get a job, I'm going to have to work for Exxon. And I'd be like, I think it's good. If you could work at Exxon and bring that spirit of what you want to change, and you could make Exxon a better company, or a product that is better for the environment, that's way better than not doing it.
Yeah. So I basically agree. I just want to point out that the idea of what if we could get 1 billion people to do something was his idea at lunch, not my idea. So yeah, I think this is really important. And you know, what people just saw in the simulation is we can't get to where we need to go with any one thing. It's just too late for that. That's daunting for some, but I think it's actually good news, and I think aligned with what you're saying. It means no matter what your expertise and your particular passion is, there's a place for you, there's a need for you. We need you to get where we want to go. And it doesn't matter whether it's policy, which is not dead around the world, it's just on life support in this country at the federal level, but not at the state and local level. And it's not just energy efficiency, it's not just cutting deforestation, it's everything. So whether you're in ops or engineering or finance or organizational change, we need you. And I think that's a very hopeful message. If everything depended on, you know, we often hear about the Manhattan Project as a model for what we need. Well, it's a terrible analogy because first of all, it was completely secret with no role for the public. It depended on a very small number of very smart people, and there was no immediate, thank goodness, broad scale up, right? And it's just not the right metaphor. The right metaphor, I think personally, and you can disagree, is closer to the civil rights movement, where we needed a lot of people, not everybody, we never had everybody in the 1960s, supporting desegregation and willing to do something, not just sort of saying, yeah, of course, I don't, you know, I'm not a racist. We never had a majority or even anywhere close to a majority, and yet that revolution brought us the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 65. And of course, that work is never done. The struggle for human rights is never over. But I think that's a much better way to think about it. Everybody is needed. And the more people that you can enroll, the better our chances are going to be. So any final words before we open it up for their questions?
I do think, I hope you all walk, if you're not there already, have a sense of optimism. For yourself, you'll feel better. And two, it is what will energize everyone else. I'm an optimist, call it what you want. I'm a techno-optimist, but I'm an optimist. You have to be. And I'm just so excited by this work, and you know, not just the work of the Earth Fund, but all the work that you are going to do in your careers and make a better world.
Great. Well, thanks. So, Tom, are you handling questions?
Yep, I'm hiding behind the podium.
Okay, yeah.
I thought John was hiding behind this.
Well, I think there's a camera.
Oh, I see.
So hi everyone, as John kind of just introduced me, my name's Tom. I'm a first year MBA student here at MIT, and I'm also part of the organizing team. So first off, thank you both for the discussion. I found it really engaging. We're gonna start with some questions that focus first on the role of AI, but the audience had quite a few questions expanding beyond that. So the first question we have here is, AI growth is outpacing the speed of regulation. So whose responsibility is it to make to make sure that AI demand does not overload our grid commitments? Either.
You know, it's one of the things when John and I talked earlier, I'm like, we sort of talking about second order effects. But I'm like, let's go back to first order effects. I'm in the camp of the analysis of like, AI growing to 30% of the electricity. I'm like, you're crazy. These companies are already spending billions of dollars, and they need to have a business model. And as much as, even if you framed it as we must compete with China, it's strategic. At the end, it's still it's an awful lot of money. And so I think these curves will always sort of flatten out. So first of all, I don't believe in some of the most fantastic predictions of how much electricity will go to AI. I think there's also we're using the words AI, and I think we're actually talking data centers. You know, there's a little bit of there's definitely a difference of that. Like, I don't think data centers are bad. This is where your medical information is, and you know, this is how ambulances get dispatched. You probably don't want to limit that. But you know, who's responsible? First of all, I just think the economics, rather than the government. I think the role of government, there's some other roles that are probably appropriate in terms of content and, you know, fake images and damage to children. I mean, there's a bunch of things that the government could do. I'm not sure. I think economics will be the way that controls the pricing. You know, there's also studies, again, I'm being a little optimistic, that actually because these hyperscalers are putting in infrastructure and paying for it, places with a lot of data centers actually have lower costs. Now, it isn't always true. It kind of depends on how the utility set it up. But anyway, I just think economics will protect us from sort of massive increases. But and I think the hyperscalers understand it. They do not want to be accused of making your bill go up, right? They'll do everything they can. So I think there's a whole bunch of, I'm just repeating myself, there's a whole bunch of things driving in the way that we would want. We shouldn't assume bad intentions by the hyperscalers. And I also don't think, I'm not sure it's the government's role to step in and try and put a law in. They don't do very good at that.
If I can just slightly disagree a little bit, which makes for great dialogue. So I agree with the basic premise that there's natural limits to this and it's extremely expensive. But I do think there's a role for regulation, and that regulation might take the form of requiring not just BYOG, bring your own generation if you want to build a new data center, but bring your own renewable low carbon generation. And I honestly think if that kind of regulation does, and that keeps electricity rates for everybody else in that grid region from going up, if businesses allow that kind of thing to happen without regulation, then the public will arise. And the NIMBY opposition and the banana opposition, banana, I don't know if you've heard this term, is build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. Right? That's going to be way more costly to your hyperscalers than a consistent set of rules that levels the playing field. So that would be my view on that. But you know, we don't want the government to be micromanaging. Let business figure out what's the best, cheapest way to build a data center with clean power, so that and pay all the costs that you're imposing on everybody else on the grid. Anyway, go ahead.
That's great. And kind of related to that, we have a question here that asks, are truly green data centers feasible or realistic? Why or why not?
Don't know. I have to assume it is possible. If you look at how much energy and water data centers are using today versus the ones that were built 10 years ago, it's dramatically improved. I would assume, I'm not a data center person, but I would assume with the right amount of renewable energy or other clean energy, which I consider nuclear and geothermal. I think the water usage is now closed loop, any number of things. And I also know that there's inventions on cooling and heating. I mean, a lot of the energy isn't actually the data center, it's in cooling. So a lot of these things are changing. I read the same articles as you about being in space. I don't know. I think there's a lot of other problems in space. But I would have to assume it's possible. And again, I think the companies that are building these things would want that to happen. It's in their economic interest to do exactly that.
Right. Go ahead.
And moving beyond AI, I did warn that some of the questions are within AI, some of them are outside. But how does growing geopolitical tension around the globe impact climate transition risk? Is it a headwind? Is it a tailwind in some situations? What are your thoughts?
Is it your turn first?
Oh,
no,
you're gonna nice,
jump ball.
Nice move. So, I mean, first of all, nobody knows what's going to happen today, tomorrow, or in the next few weeks in Iran. But on the one hand, the volatility in fossil fuel prices that this war has created is a tremendous boost for solar power, right?
I agree.
My own home, we did a deep energy retrofit, my wife and I, about 10.5 years ago, completely got rid of the gas that was providing heat and hot water. Now we have heat pump hot water, lots of extra insulation, high efficiency appliances, solar on the roof, blah, blah, blah. Over the past 10 and a half years, we've made 30% more energy than we've used with zero fossil fuels. And we're able actually now, because of that surplus, no heating bill, no electric bill, and Eversource, our utility here, owes me $5,400. That means I can run both of our now electric cars for free with 100% green energy. The price of gasoline doesn't touch me at all. The price of natural gas doesn't touch me at all. That's really important. Every business can do that. Every low-income housing development can do that, so nobody has to choose in the winter between heating and eating. That's a big deal, and we can do that. So on the one hand, it's a tremendous push for accelerating the green transition. Unfortunately, governments in many countries are responding to the rise in gasoline, fuel, cooking oil, et cetera, prices by saying, let's take the tax on gasoline away because we want to look like we're doing something to help people who are paying extra for gasoline. This is completely the wrong direction. What you can do, so we got to protect the low-income folks, right? Affluent people like you and me, we can handle it, right? But we've got to protect low-income people, and the way to do that is increase the price of the fossil fuels and give every dollar of that revenue back to people as a carbon dividend or a carbon rebate, and that will protect them, especially because low-income folks have small carbon footprints. Chris Knittel, who you heard from yesterday, and colleagues, explored this for the US, and if you're in the middle to bottom percentiles of the US income distribution, you would be better off, more money in your pocket with a carbon price and a dividend policy because your carbon footprints are low. And affluent people who fly around and have multiple cars and maybe multiple homes, they're going to pay more and can afford it. So I think that's the path forward. And the governments that are saying, oh, take the gasoline tax away while the crisis they're hurting their long-term resiliency. Now, making that case to an elected official who might face the midterms in 6 months, that's a tough thing to do. But that's the kind of thing that our AI interlocutor said is actually where a lot of the leverage is. The innovation is great, not enough.
I would just, I agree with that. I think it is in the short run, it's probably a harm, but in the long run, I've listened to if you're India and Brazil, I think it's going to be a benefit to a transit. They're all going to look at energy independence, energy sovereignty in those countries, who, by the way, a lot of those countries are still working together, that will ultimately drive strategically to more cleaner energy.
And then, Tom, I know that you were in the audience while John was presenting the En-ROADS simulation. I'm curious to get your thoughts on, as we saw the different levers that could be pulled to create a more sustainable future, which were the ones that really caught your eye in terms of moving the needle that you're really interested in?
Or that you don't buy at all.
Well,
sure.
I had a lot of, I thought it was interesting that you moved a lot of things and it didn't move the temperature. So it made me, I'm like, oh, well, now I want to go play with it because it's like,
great.
Well, maybe because it's all over there in processing. It has nothing to do with the electrical grid. That's what I didn't know. But I was glad that you did have, ultimately we need carbon removal. And so you had those sliders. Yep. I think that's an area that's going to become increasingly important. So that's one. I'm a believer that we have to create new energy baseload systems like geothermal and nuclear that have lower costs. So you wouldn't be replacing, the assumption was, well, I grew nuclear, so I took it away from renewable. You have to figure out how do I if I had a cost that was lower than coal and natural gas, then I think economically you would do that. So that was one area. I had some other clever one, but it's now escaping me. But I think it sort of shows you've got to work on a number of levers, and that's okay. we should do that. Oh, I know. The last point was sort of, the second order effects that you talked about. And I'm like, the third order effects, if it really got to 3.5 degrees, I don't want to debate the temperature. If the impact starts to become so obvious and painful, that will, the third order effect is boy, now they're going to put in the carbon tax. If they didn't do it before, they'll do it now.
Yeah.
And so there's another effect that's going to start to bring the rest of those down, and I think we should understand that's how systems work.
No, I think that's quite right. And the problem is, so not to be, Debbie Downer here, but the problem is by the time the damage from climate change is so obvious and salient to everybody that there's political agreement that we need to act, it's just too late because of the long time delays. It's called the baked-in warming or the warming in the pipeline because of the biogeophysical time delays, the fact that almost all these really severe harms from climate change are essentially irreversible on any human timescale. Suppose we overshoot 2 and then come back down by the end of the century, which people are now talking about as what we're going to end up doing. The extra sea level rise, it's not going to go away. The melting of the great ice sheets, the loss of snowpack, the wildfires, the extreme weather, and the lives lost from climate change during that period of overshoot, those people are not coming back to life. So we can't wait. That's why we developed this simulation tool, so that people could, in some sense, begin to experience in a little bit of a way why we need to act before it's so obvious that we can have political consensus.
And that's actually a great segue, because Tom, you spoke a bit about thinking years ahead. Some of these technologies have maturation times of 30 years. Obviously, John's expressing a lot of urgency that we all feel in this room. But if we look 5 to 10 years ahead, how do you and the Earth Fund define success? What does that look like to you a decade in the future?
Well, I think these issues are both, will take a long time, and they are urgent, and that is a somewhat interesting dilemma. We have to act urgently, even though it will take 10 years to make some of these changes. So, I think the Basis Earth Fund would measure success on, of these avenues the theories of change. Are we making progress at the pace that we want? Can we start to see those results? I think we need not just new inventions. I think we need to have a change in public perception and government will. So public and government will has to change, and I think even that's another area that philanthropy I think can help at. So I think if we can see, what did my MIT friend? We want to see the second order, the second derivative up. So even if I can't see the position change, it is accelerating in the right direction.
Sure. And in that vein, you had described yourself as a techno-optimist. So for each of you, I'd be very curious to learn a bit about one project or concept in climate technology that you were most optimistic about.
I have a recency bias because I just spent the week looking at carbon capture and storage. And I came into it thinking these things will never be at a price that the $1 trillion cost of what governments would pay. But I'm much more optimistic after some of the things I saw this week. And also, what's interesting is about these things like, wow, you'd have to, at global scale, do something. That is a bit of a Manhattan project. But I think those sorts of things are possible. And I also think that it needs, if necessary, a lot more investment could go into that area and could make 10 gigaton change possible. That's exciting. It's a little sad that we had to get there rather than solving the original problem. I'm always preferring solving the original problem than the fire extinguisher afterwards, but I think it's possible.
Right. Well, I guess on CCS, my view is if you had a meaningfully large carbon price, that then makes it potentially possible for CCS to be economically viable, and to the extent that there would still be demand for coal, demand for gas, and so forth, you would see CCS deployed. Great, this is the Sloan School of Management, right? I love technology, and I think markets where they can be made to work, reduce frictions, reduce interference from powerful entities, fantastic, let's do that. The one that I would nominate is efficiency. You saw here, efficiency made a big difference, And we've got a huge existing base of housing and commercial space and industrial facilities and industrial processes and legacy supply chains that are generating most of the emissions. And the lifetime of those assets is really, really long. So in addition to stiffening building codes and using new technology and AI enabled where we can to increase the efficiency of new build, we've got to retrofit the existing stock. And I did that in my own house. Now, MIT faculty are, financially well off, and I could afford it. The real challenge is, how do we do that, make that an economically viable proposition for low-income housing, for apartments, for condos? It's a much harder problem. If you're living in an apartment, it's not a technical issue. It's super easy technically. It's how do I get everybody in the same building to agree? And the same with large apartment blocks. This can be done. AI is not going to solve that problem. That's getting to know your neighbors and working out agreements. And landlord is responsible typically for the upgrade to the capital stock of the building, heat pumps and et cetera, installation, high efficiency appliances. But the tenants usually pay the electric bill and the utility bills. That's a classic agency problem in economics that many people here have studied. There are solutions for that are actually not just theory, but are happening. But that I think is enormously promising and will have tremendous, I think when people cost out fully, what does it take to do that and what's the payback? It's going to have positive NPV because when the efficiency of those low-income housing units goes up, health improves, productivity improves. That grows the economy, it creates good jobs, healthcare costs go down. And that is good for the economy, it's good for people's lives, it's good for equity and social justice, win-win-win across the board. But we're not there yet, but I think that's a huge opportunity and we can do it.
So the next question is a bit about, we're going to frame this as AI in your careers. How do you keep up with the pace of culture, AI adoption, and optimization? Obviously, it seems like every other week there's a new announcement. It's tough to stay on top of it. But I'd like you both to share a little bit about, how have you adapted?
It's a good question. As John mentioned, my last 5 years at Amazon was running Alexa. I considered myself quite the expert on AI. And then I realized 2 years later, I am so far out of date. And I live in Seattle, but a few weeks, while I'm in DC now, a few weeks ago, I'm living in DC now, I went back to Seattle. I'm meeting with my neighbors and my friends who either work at Microsoft and work at Amazon. And they were so excited by what the models are doing, particularly in the software industry. A lot of the advances in AI obviously were built around making software writing faster, and they're like, oh, this agent built another agent and solved problems at Microsoft and I'm like, and on April 14th, Skynet became alive. But they were so excited, and they said, what they told me, like, Tom, if you haven't tried this in 6 weeks, you're out of date. If you're still talking about hallucinations, that was last year. You are out of date. And so but even they were saying some of the members of their own organization, even though they've made a job requirement to be using some of these AI tools, they're not doing it. But it said generally, Tom, just put an hour aside every day just to use the actual tools that you have, and figure out what it's useful and what it's not useful for. But the only way to stay up to date is to do it. And even that, I think a lot of what people are thinking about have to do with large language models, which is, I'm still using it like Google. It writes a longer report, and I don't have blue links. But there's a lot more to do. And then if I look at what my boss Jeff is doing, is looking at the application of world models, which is a little different approach than large language models, and I don't even know what I'm talking about past that, but he believes that artificial intelligence will be effective at, like, can you build a new rocket, right? This is very different than, answer my essay question for class. And I think that's exciting.
Which you shouldn't do unless it's allowed by your professor.
Right, yeah. But I've heard, like at junior highs, they're like, you can use it, you just have to show us the prompts that you use, right? Teach the kids how to use the prompts. I thought that was clever. One last thing I'll throw in, it was an expression I heard last night, was we shouldn't have called it AI, shouldn't have called it artificial intelligence. Those two words actually don't go together. And, but what language models are is, think about it as aggregate intelligence, right? It can do things. If you think about that as its value, I see these things as tools, not as, they're not replacements for me. Somebody who uses a tool might replace me, but I see them as tools. And I think, you know, however you find a way to do it, the biggest thing is probably just use it a little bit every day. I've had my other friends are like, Tom, don't use the verb, what could AI do for me, not what, you know, what's the stock market? It's not a research, it's not a what, it's a what you would do. Use a verb and you will start to think about AI appropriately.
So I completely sympathize with the feeling that things are moving too fast. I mean, it's a classic example of future shock. And I think I'm, you know, reasonably clever, but it is outpacing us all. And it's a lot of effort to stay up to date. What I really worry about, though, is how quickly things are changing, and so much faster than we can test and make sure things are safe. And I think you're all aware of Anthropic's Mythos, and you know, at least they're trying to get it tested by large incumbent organizations where there's high risk that Mythos could let bad actors find vulnerabilities and shut down critical sectors of our economy really quickly and far faster and more effectively than we could respond. But they're better than most of the other companies on this, and it's still not anywhere close to good enough. And I really worry about that. You know, the amount of money that's going in there and the imperative to grow revenue and grow valuations so you can raise the next few $100 billion that you need by the end of this year to stay on top means safety has been pushed way, way down. Safety teams have been eliminated. Safety guidelines have been compromised, and it's very, very scary to me.
So keeping an eye on time, this is going to be our final question. But when we think about all of us leaving here today, especially the MBA audience that we have here, what would be one tangible ask of each of us as we go back to our regular lives? What is one thing that you'd like us to start changing tomorrow?
What you eat. You can make a small change in eating less beef or meat, whatever that is. That would make an amazing difference. It's one example. When we were talking about this billion hearts, one question is, what would you ask a billion people to do? And it all doesn't have to be one thing. It could be a lot of different things. It could be go plant some flowers. But one of the most powerful things you could do is change what you eat.
So I guess I would say that, well, students come to me all the time and say, you know, I'm really worried about the climate crisis or whatever it is. What should I do that can have the most impact? And I think the answer, and this is not unique to me, it's not original to me, is what do you love? What do you really care about? Where's your energy? Where's your passion? Because, you know, if I told you that X is the thing you ought to do that's going to have the most impact, and you don't care about X, you don't know anything about X, and you try it, you're going to fail, and it'll be personally discouraging. So what do you love to do? You need that intersection between what the world needs and what you love to do. And your capabilities can grow and change. So what you love to do is not fixed now. You can grow, but find something. And just go back to what Jason talked about at the very beginning today. One of the things you can do, concrete thing, right now, today, at the reception at the MIT Museum later, and then when you go back to class or work after today, is go talk to somebody about these issues, not of, let me tell you what you need to do, or let me tell you why you don't understand the problem, but, you know, here's what I'm worried about. What are you worried about? How can we learn together? Do that. Put it in your calendar, as Jason suggested. Make it a commitment. And a commitment is, you know, a New Year's resolution. That's not what a commitment is. You know, I'm going to go to the gym tomorrow. It's something you're going to do with a specific person at a specific time that's in your calendar, and we always encourage our folks, write it down and post it in public, whether it's on your refrigerator or in your cubicle or on your backpack that you're carrying around as you go to your classes. When you make the commitment and it's public, you're much more likely to follow through. It doesn't matter what it is. Eat less meat, great. Bicycle to work like I do, great. Doesn't matter. Do something. And then tell people about it and how you had fun doing it. That way it'll spread.
All right, well, John, Tom, thank you so much for your time, and thank you, audience, for joining us today.